Welcome to the show that's unscripted, unfiltered, and uncontrollable.
Alright, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to part 3 of a part 5 series of WcW nWo. This is topic of discussion this week. We are going to be going into Starrcade of 1997. Building all the way into, well, next week we'll be doing 98. But this week we're going to be talking about all the big moments that happened during the prime of the nWo's tenure. Of course, it was not 96. They started out literally. Actually, if you want to predate it, 95 was a small little build up between Hogan going the whole black and white thing, and then Hall and Nash just showing up, a year later. But this time we're going deep into the persona of Hogan, Hall, Nash. Basically, we got through the transformation of the nWo, who all joined. Then down the road we're going to talk about how things started breaking down as well. But like we said, we're going to talk about Starrcade, which was one of the biggest events of all time for WCW. It was basically, I believe that was their WrestleMania, if I recall. So, but alongside with me, as always, is my wingman, Mr. Chaos himself. How are you doing tonight?
I'm pretty good, man. It's good to be back. I think we had left off last week at I guess it was Starrcade '97. We touched base on the the ratings year that WCW had in general, and like you said, we were looking at that Starrcade 1997. It was supposed to be WCW's biggest pay-per-view of all time. You had Sting versus Hogan, one of the first original dream matches, at least where the internet was involved, and it was an early internet, but we'll be starting from there. I definitely think.
Oh, absolutely. I'm right here looking at the card as well, and I gotta say, this was, back in these days, this is top tier talent at least per se to WCW standards. We'll definitely talk about most of these guys in upcoming episodes, because one of the biggest things I want to do is basically the fallout of WCW and where most of these guys went afterwards, and then you'll see how top tier they really weren't to another company's standards. But for now, we're going to stick to our guns with the whole WCW, so.
Right. I mean, the end of 1998 was a big year for the nWo. It was a big year for wrestling. I think with 96, like we started our first episode, we kind of touched on that. It was the beginning. It was a major change in the industry. 97 was just a ratings year. Nobody had ever seen ratings like that in the industry. We really haven't seen anything like that since, as far as on a week-to-week basis. From both companies, and then now we're in 98. So I think 98 is kind of when the shit hit the fan for WCW. I know a lot of people like to say it's 99 or even 2000, but I think if what we go over in 1998, what went on with the nWo and WCW in general, is you could see the downfall. There's a lot of nonsense, for lack of better word, just straight up ridiculousness, no direction whatsoever. You can kind of see it all, really, the cracks starting to show in 98, and we definitely want to touch base on that. I know we want to kind of talk about Scott Hall.
Yes, but yes, you're right. So tonight we're going to talk about the dissension of the Wolf, or of the nWo. We're going to talk about, like we said, we got Team Black and White, Team Hollywood, and then of course, thanks to that, after the whole Starrcade thing, we started seeing, like you said, the armor started to crack. So we're starting to see a whole new thing come into play. And it all started with Kevin Nash.
Absolutely.
But of course, like you said, the whole Scott Hall thing, I apologize in advance, folks. Last week we weren't able to do the podcast, not for the fact of losing Scott Hall, but for the fact that I almost lost my dog last week. She had a major hemorrhage gastric issue. We don't know what caused it, so I took last weekend to help her recover, and quite frankly, she's doing a whole lot better today. Been getting her out walking around, getting a little bit healthier, eating healthier again too. You want to talk about baby and a dog, dude?
I know that feeling.
It's like raising a child, man. Let me tell you, it was.
How's she feeling now, man?
Dude, I'll be honest. Today, well, she's afraid to use the bathroom in the yard now. Like she'll pee, but she's afraid to poop because before I took her out, she actually had the hemorrhage in the yard, so that freaks her out. I mean, I went out there and I basically just like rinsed everything off with hot soap and water, and then just rinsed it off out of the yard. But she's afraid to do that there, but she'll do her business elsewhere, which is good because she is afraid to go. But yeah, she's a whole lot better. I took her for her first mile walk. So, but
she can do a mile, man. She's getting there.
Yeah, I would have let her do too if she really wanted to, but I'm not going to push the limits with her. But yeah,
no.
As we all know, last week, WWE and all their dirt sheet media sites have announced the passing of the late Scott Hall, one of the greatest pioneers to pro wrestling. Of course, we all knew him as Razor Ramon, Magnum TA, if you want to go back to the AWA days. One of his best friends back in those days was the late Kurt Hennig. One of the greatest tag teams of all time there before they parted ways and went to their own companies. And eventually they found their way back into a company, and that was the WWF at the time. So it was just, a lot of backstory with those two, but a huge, an even bigger story with them because they also formed up in the NWO. So it was like a long-term friendship that, was never ending. But for Scott Hall, may he rest in peace. Our condolences go to his family and him.
Right. I would like to add to that is that, the AWA, like you said, that produced tremendous talent in the late 80s and going forward.
Absolutely. And, of course, they were part of the territorial system, too.
Right.
Alongside NWA and... NWA.
Scott was really like he was friends with the Road Warriors, Kurt Hennig. I'm trying to think of who else was kind of in that crew there with them, and there's all Minnesota guys. Maybe I don't think it was Tully Blanchard, but I know it was the Road Warriors, Hall, Hennig, Rick Rude was the other guy, and they all kind of.
These were the old school guys, and. What they were doing in all these businesses, it was working together until they knew their time was starting to come to pasture, and they started working on passing the torch. But during the time of passing the torch, especially in a group like the NWO, it was more about power, authoritarian power, dictatorship through force. And when they became part of the New World Order, we got to see a whole new side of them that we've never seen before.
Right.
And of course, it was never just about the, power. It was just about sheer numbers. And that's where most of the power came from. You mess with one guy, you mess with them all. It didn't matter if you're part of the A team or B team.
Right. Now, that's kind of what, I also thought was kind of their downfall, too.
Yeah.
As we're talking about 1998, and we'll go over it. There was so many members. Every week, one or two wrestlers would join. Some of them were off the wall. Some of them made no sense. Some of them made sense. But it was an up and down year, 1998 for WCW in general and the NWO. Most in general, the NWO.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we enjoyed the NWO from 96 to 98. And, of course, during that, of course, episode 3 tonight is the Dissension of the Wolfpack. Why I am going back to Starcade. We talked about that 2 weeks ago. But, after the fallout of Starcade, like you said, we started to see everyone slip through the cracks.
Right. And
they were losing power.
Right, and the strange thing was, and may rest in peace. And I'd seen him in ECW before that. Obviously, everybody knows I'm a big ECW guy, but Louis Piccoli was the first member of the NWO in 1998.
That's right.
It was during a feud with Scott Hall's first feud in '98. Since we're on Scott Hall, was with Larry Zbyszko, even though Hall had a title shot in line because he had won World War III the year before. But going back to Starrcade '97, as we talked about on the last show, Sting beat Hogan, and it wasn't the ending anybody deserved. It was a little bit controversial. I believe Nick Patrick was involved, and so J.J. Dillon, first inaugural Thunder. One of many bad Thunders, unfortunately. Stripped Sting of the title.
Yes.
So we don't know who Scott Hall's facing, so they stick him in the feud with Zbyszko, Larry Zbyszko, who I was never a fan of, even his work at ringside. He was a great wrestler in his early days. His feud with Bruno Sammartino, his mentor, everybody knows that. But to get away from olden times, Louis Piccoli joined, and he helped Scott Hall beat Larry Zbyszko. So that's kind of how 1998 opened for the NWO. A little bit more of a whimper than a bang.
Yeah, of course. One of the biggest things, during all this, as a matter of fact, I believe it even happened in '97. When we were talking about slipping through the cracks, it was the feud between Hogan and the Giant. That was when you want to think about it, that was the seeds that were planted prior. Because I was actually watching some WCW NWO material earlier today and last night as well. And basically it was when Giant won World War III.
Right, so that had to be like '95, right? Before the NWO was even
no, because it was the whole they were coming out. So Hogan was champ. Hogan was champ then. Yeah, okay. Because what happened was the winner of World War III got a guaranteed shot against the WCW World Heavyweight Champion, and at the time it was the NWO World Champion, as they called it. So
that's what I was getting at with Hall too. Yeah. So it's I hate to interrupt, and it's funny that you mentioned the Giant, and we didn't really mention it either. Going back to what we closed on Starrcade '97 was
it was completely neglected, and I completely forgot about it.
But at the end of Starrcade '97, I believe Piper was involved for like 6 months.
Yeah,
pretty heavily, and the Giant was still in the NWO, and I believe it ended with. They wanted the Giant to chokeslam Piper, and he wouldn't do it. So the Giant was gone from the NWO going into '98.
So basically, that was the beginning of the cracks, and within months' time, we started to see more tension build up. And was it on Nitro they did it, or was it on Thunder they did it?
About the J.J. Dillon thing about Wolfpack.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know. The Wolfpack is like a little bit further
down the road. Yeah.
Yeah. I think the Wolfpack's more like mid '98, and just like, and maybe I'm wasting too much time on it, but the first few members in '98 are just awful. You had, I don't mean to put them down. So Louis Piccoli's first. Then you have Brian Adams. Everybody knows him as Crush.
Yeah.
And then you have Ed Leslie, who's fucking Brutus the Barber Beefcake, and he's in a full beard. He looks like a He looks like a Hell's Angel outlaw.
He comes in as the disciple.
Right. So they just started off the year as utter garbage. Hall gets his title shot after 3 months, and unfortunately, I think it was when he had a lot of personal issues. So
yeah, that's right. Hall was dealing with the whole alcoholism thing. I remember the whole thing. It was to the point, even when he came back, he was still dealing with the issues. And we can't keep taking him off the card why don't we just throw this into a kayfabe mix? And that was the worst idea that you could do to a talent.
That was terrible.
You know, like I said, WCW is a great company, at least in terms of talent. But when it came to the booking and creative and the HR and the back, it was a complete disaster. And if you want to know even more, just watch the Scott Hall story or not Scott Hall, but Scott Steiner story. This dude said he would just literally come in, he could shoot anybody and get away with it because everyone was afraid backstage. From what I remember reading up on, dude, you gotta think, Big Papa Pump, he was big, he was always angry, man. That was the story of his life, and man,
he may or may not have been taking some special vitamins. I do recall, you know what's crazy is Scott Steiner, like the Steiner brothers, Scott Steiner, and actually it was 98. I think it was Super Brawl where Hall and Nash, actually, this was after Hall lost his title shot to Sting. The Outsiders eventually won the titles from the Steiner brothers, and that was when Scott turned. And Scott joined the NWO. So Scott, who I don't know if he had his little fucking bleach beard then, and
at the time, I don't think he was
ripped. I don't think he was like that.
He didn't have it yet. Well, he was ripped already. Now, during that time, he was also recovering from a neck injury. That I remember. And then as soon as he came back, he came back more jacked than he was before he was even in the ring.
He had like fucking softball biceps.
Yeah, I was just like, holy Jesus. I was like, and during this time, we don't think of steroids or anything else, you know. There's no thought in mind, you know. To a guy like me, steroids doesn't exactly exist in this world just yet. But after watching it over years and going back to recapping it, it's like, we kind of know some guys that look kind of like that nowadays.
I mean, I had to have been like 12, 13, 14 years old, and even I thought, this fucking guy is juiced. He's on steroids. Because there were guys that looked big, but Scott Steiner just looked ridiculous. And in a way, it's kind of disheartening because if you go back to how he wrestled with his brother as a tag team wrestler, and there were times where they gave him singles opportunities. I'm not sure if he ever won a TV title, maybe back in like the Bill Watts booking era, like before they went to WWF briefly. But he was a fantastic wrestler. He was a great worker. He moved well. He had some power. And then he came back. He was just a total fucking stiff. And he was always a stiff past that.
Yeah. I mean, you can
forgive my blunt honesty on Big Papa Pump. Holla if you hear me.
And of course, 1998 definitely changed the era and the format for not just WCW, but NWO as well. If I recall, it was no longer NWO Soda. It was officially WCW, NWO, everything.
Yeah.
So it was like, as soon as NWO no longer was just a faction, they were officially a complete brand. And that was one thing a lot of people didn't think about at the time. They're like, oh, this is so cool. WCW and NWO working together. They've been working together since the beginning of time.
Pretty much, yeah. And the funny thing is that now that we were talking about the Wolfpack, is that I think a lot of people may credit Kevin Nash with like the Wolfpack and how things started. But to me, the guy was actually Randy Savage. Because Savage, if there was a feud that culminated and started to begin to fester in 98, and it was probably, I think it was at Super Brawl, and Savage actually came down, and I think he helped Sting in that match.
Yeah.
Where Savage was making it clear that he didn't need the NWO. There was a lot of heat between him and Hogan, probably even backstage, like there was for.
I mean, when you think about it, it's been since the WWF times that there was always a heat between the two. I mean, when you think about it, these were the two top guys in a former, company, and they brought that same exact attitude to the next one. And honestly, here's how I see it: the chemistry was right there. This is, long-term booking from two different companies put in one, and everything was faction-based. It was just the fact that these two, when they were the mega powers, if you remember all that going on, I mean, there was legitimate heat between those two because of Miss Elizabeth. God rest her soul. And
Right.
but so yeah, basically, the whole thing with the NWO between Black and White and Wolfpack.
Right. And and then just to touch base again, and I hate to interrupt, is
it's all good.
After World War III, when Hall lost this thing, and we kind of touched base that was the beginning of Scott Hall's, well, not the beginning, obviously, but his personal demons kind of crept up at that point. 6, everybody knows, is Sean Waltman, a.k.a., the 1-2-3 Kid. He was out injured, and then they sent him to rehab, and that kind of actually caused a lot of issues backstage between whatever powers that be there were, and Kevin Nash, Scott Hall. So things started to kind of slowly unravel, even as far as in the backstage of things and what they were doing as far as the creative side of things. Like, I think later on they had a fucking baseball bat on a pole match. It was stupid. I don't even know what pay-per-view that was.
It was WCW. It's some Rusev booking right there, honestly. Because everything's ended up on a pole later on down the road. We'll talk about that later on. But yeah, like you said, basically, 6, who was out injured since October, was released from his contract. Shortly thereafter, Hall was removed from television, which led to the confrontation between Nash, Bischoff, and Hogan on the 26th episode. A March 26th episode of Thunder. And then, of course, I believe the week later, that's basically when,
Right. And even before that, one of my favorite NWO members of all time, actually, I think, he joined at the pay-per-view, and I forgot to touch base on this, but one of my favorite NWO members of all time helped Hall defeat Larry Zbyszko, and it was Dusty Rhodes. Do you ever remember, when you think of the NWO, do you think Dusty Rhodes?
No, honestly, no way. But that bionic elbow, that spoke all the volumes in the world. And
right, but that just gets back to my point of when we opened up the show. I said that there was a lot of ups and downs, a lot of stupid shit. There was never any reason for Dusty Rhodes to join the NWO, and it didn't last long.
No, it didn't. I mean, he was there for all but a few episodes, and then after that, he was not to be seen again. Right. I think they tried to do it based off, old-fashioned star power, and
everything at that time for the NWO, and a lot of things on TV at the time was shock value. They wanted shock value on a week-to-week basis. It didn't matter how it developed or became long-term. It was about that week-to-week shock value.
Yeah, kind of sounds like a certain company we watch today.
Yeah, there you go.
Stay tuned to this week's episode as we have another debut. No, let's not go there. I love the company, but I can't handle too many surprises.
To be honest with you, they do that one. They do that one. And then the other company always does. He's got a big announcement this week.
Yeah.
There's a fucking big announcement every week. There should just be a guy in that promotion called Big Announcement. And instead of sending out old Tony, they should just send out a guy called Big Announcement. He should make the big fucking announcement.
I totally agree.
Not all these announcements are that big. I mean,
no.
Okay, Jay Lethal. I like Jay Lethal. That's
I
a
enjoyed
great
him.
announcement.
I miss his ROH and Impact days.
Hey. Yeah, Keith Lee, big announcement.
Yeah.
But there's been some, the buying of ROH, big announcement, but there's been a lot of other big announcements that weren't so big.
Yeah, I want something that I haven't seen before, but honestly, I've seen it all in this business,
Yeah, me too.
In the 40 years of existence, I've been watching wrestling since I was 6 years old. So it's whatever you're going to announce, I've probably seen before.
Right, I hear you. Yeah, first pay-per-view I ever saw was 87 Survivor Series. Not that I was 4 years old at the time, but,
But yeah, let's see. Let's go back into this. So, of course, we had a match between Hogan and Savage, and Disciple ended up getting involved in that match and gave referee Nick Patrick a fucking neck breaker. And this match was a no disqualification, so it started building up more and more tension into what was going on. So after that, Furious Nash charged to the ring to aid the fallen Savage. So this right here started doing even more build-ups, and I completely forgot that Savage was actually a part of this whole Wolfpack thing. But it would make perfect sense too, because he and Sting, they were like,
and even when you think back on it, like nowadays the Wolfpack, even them seemed a lot cooler. I think NWO Hollywood was like Vincent Bischoff, Scott Steiner.
Yeah, and you started to realize the personalities changed.
Buff Bagwell. Yeah, like the NWO Hollywood was really stale. It was basically Hogan and his minions.
Yeah, and you still had the A team, you still had the B team on NWO Hollywood, and then you just had the Wolfpack. And then, of course, what's sad about this whole thing too? You had NWO Hollywood versus NWO Wolfpack. So what does that leave with WCW? That basically put them in the back of the line for this entire time. And
it left them, I'll tell you what it left them with. It left them with, as usual, for years, a great opening Nitro where you had incredible cruiserweights that pretty much set the standard for a lot of what we watch today. And then you also have a guy named Goldberg. And Bill Goldberg made his debut in 1998.
That's right.
So, unfortunately, I don't know if it's a fortunate thing or unfortunate, but we do have to touch on Goldberg.
Yes, because, of course, in 98, Hogan versus Goldberg on Monday Nitro. For the WCW World Championship. And let me tell you, that main event, the crowd went apeshit. If you thought Sting versus Hogan was loud, this match right here, and Hogan just got destroyed.
I think that was at the Georgia Dome too. So that's like,
so it was WCW home turf.
That's holy, right? That's holy grail ground for WCW.
Yeah, because they were based out of Atlanta.
That's a big ass stadium too. So. But given this is an NWO series podcast, I won't go too in depth into Bill Goldberg's run. Obviously, there was the streak. We know.
Yeah.
I think his first title win was actually over Raven. I think it was a U.S. title.
U.S. title, that's correct.
Yeah.
And
so
that wasn't even a match. That was just a rival spear, and that was it.
Raven
put him over for no reason at all, and Raven has a huge resume in his wrestling career.
Sure. Mm-hmm. Yep. I mean, the flock secondary to NWO was pretty solid for an NWO.
For the fact that the Flock actually got involved with the whole NWO thing before the I believe it was before the Wolfpack. The Flock came down after Kevin Nash, but too bad that the Flock got destroyed by Nash single-handedly, which also showed how weak of a faction they were against the NWO. And
it's bad creative.
Yeah, very bad, stupid idea from bad creative. We'll stick with that.
Right. I know we're jumping all over the place, and then...
But, going back to this whole, Hollywood versus Wolfpack thing, of course, like you said, this is more Savage-inspired than it was Nash. But the only reason I picked Nash is because when we finally start seeing the NWO Wolfpack start coming out, it started out with Kevin Nash coming out first. And then over time, they started doing a recruiting process. It was it was Nash, Savage, and I believe Hall finally comes back after a while.
Right. But then the other guy was the Stinger joined.
Oh, well, actually, before it was a Stinger, it was Lex Luger. They got Luger in a Wolfpack.
Right. Oh, yeah. I forgot about Luger, yeah.
They used Luger to recruit a Stinger in. And Sting was basically on the ropes of, he's a loner.
Right.
He's by himself.
You know what I always remembered about that? It was so strange is that Sting was out for after Sting joined the Wolfpack, it was briefly, and then he was out for 6 to 12 months again. and I don't know if Steve Borden's personal problems or if it was an injury, but Bret Hart was the one that actually put him out of action. And but they never had Bret at that time in the NWO. It was like they always teased it and they would never commit to it.
Yeah.
So
I think creative was slipping a lot with the whole thing. And when we talk about this, you also got to remember backstage politics was the biggest thing. It's always roamed around. I mean, we still use that term today. They use it hard, especially in WWE. Companies like AEW, they're more free based, and I mean, if they use politics, they're going to use their top tier stars, guys like Punk, maybe Omega when he comes back. But most of these guys are chill with how they do things because they want to run a good business and they don't want it to go under. And that's basically how this whole thing put it under.
Right. What we watched here and experienced here was like the ultimate example of people unwilling to put other people over for the sake of a better product. And it was like the ultimate test of ego, and there was so many egos and nobody would ever give in. But I mean, you had a lot of egos, but obviously you could see the dissension because of just the ego itself between guys like Savage, Hogan, even probably Sting to an extent. I don't want to commit to that, but Hogan's obviously the biggest. Savage had a Savage too.
Savage had an ego, but the thing was, he was a humble guy. I mean, if you think about it, what he told Hogan after all the things they've been through, be a man, Hogan. I mean, he even did a rap video.
Right, and Bischoff didn't help matters much.
No, not really. I mean, we can always go back to when the NWO formed, and we can go back to the early Raw days when Jim Cornette used to cut all these promos, and back in these days, Jim Cornette did whatever the fuck he wanted to because he's Jim fucking Cornette. So he did that. He did that shoot on the NWO, and he took a shot at Eric Bischoff. He said the only reason he's in the NWO is because he wanted to create himself some new friends. And I'm like, God, if that's not a shoot, I don't know what to tell you.
And at the time, the NWO, they started, and wrestling in general started to get a lot of mainstream exposure. So Hogan was off and on. I guess it was probably Jay Leno, and you had Rodman on, and the whole thing with Karl Malone. Obviously, the Bulls. Again, we talked about that last episode, but again, the Bulls played the Jazz, so it was like a Malone. I think this time Malone came with DDP.
Yeah. DDP comes out and he rescues, Jay Leno from Hogan and Rodman, and Malone ends up getting picked over on a Monday Nitro, I think it was. He comes out and he actually does the diamond cutter on Nitro, I believe, if I recall. He and DDP did it together, and I was like, oh. As a matter of fact, they used it at Road Wild. It used to be Hog Wild, and they changed it to Road Wild.
Yeah. Sturgis.
Like a biker rally that ends up getting and of course, the entire match, like, you can't hear commentary anymore because the bikers are revving up their engines. I don't think that would have worked today with the gas prices and the economy. They wouldn't be able to rev one engine.
I'll tell you, one of the great matches that I remember, I think it was like 94 Hog Wild or Road Wild or whatever they were calling it at that time, was Dean. It opened the show, was Dean Malenko versus Benoit. And it was a great match in Sturgis, South Dakota.
Yeah, I never understood WCW's, like...
Yeah, they did some strange shit. They had a monster truck, then they had a NASCAR car. I mean, WCW before the NWO was I guess you could still say it was a southern-based territory, so it made sense.
Yeah, and it's just like... They defined sports and entertainment. Literally.
Right.
They defined it all before WWF could get their hands on that actual trademark. They defined sports and entertainment. And they took every sport that they could, especially NASCAR, since it's a southern-based, venue. And, the whole NASCAR thing just stuck out.
Right, and then as '98 continued, there was more garbage. Stevie Ray joined the NWO Hollywood. It was just a lot of filler, and then they brought the Warrior back, the Ultimate Warrior.
Yeah, One Warrior Nation, in which that was a complete abomination, and we got Hogan versus Warrior one last time, and
right, and
I'd rather.
Horace. Then all of a sudden, Horace Hogan comes back. What I mean, let me ask you this: what the fuck is the difference between the Disciple and Horace Hogan?
There was nothing.
I have no idea. It's the same human being.
Well, Horace was supposed to be Hogan's nephew, while the Disciple was like a brother to him.
Beefcake. Yeah. The Disciple was Beefcake, but they looked exactly alike. They served the same purpose.
I mean, they dressed the same. The only thing was Horace Hogan was bald. He was bald, actually, if you remember. So it kind of worked with the whole Hogan pattern.
I try not to remember Horace Hogan.
Try not to remember anything at this point.
Yeah,
this is when NWO starts having
We're getting into the fucking doom and gloom of the NWO, unfortunately.
Like, who would ever think we'd actually start saying that? Like, in the beginning, in its heyday, it was great, and now we're starting to get into weird territory.
We have reached near bottom. Yep.
Like, holy cow! Like they're just like scraping at the bottom of the barrel for talent that they've used before. Amazing. And it's funny because Horace Hogan, I forget who he was, what his real character name was, or his real persona was, but he was in WCW prior, and he used to be a jobber. And then they just said, we're just gonna, like, this is the kind of guy that would like open dark matches and shit before the show starts.
Yeah. It's amazing that we went from, I guess, December of '97. We're talking about Sting versus Hulk Hogan. It was supposed to be comparable to Andre the Giant versus Hulk Hogan, at least from WCW's standpoint. And then we're at this point now where things are falling apart.
Yeah, I mean,
I think there was a time in the late '98 where Ric Flair he faked a heart attack. So,
God, they did a lot of crazy shit in WCW, period, man. Let me tell you, it's just like, why did we continue watching it? During this time, this is when the ratings started to decline for WCW.
Right.
Fans started getting smart. And they're like, all right, WCW isn't what it used to be. The NWO is definitely not what it used to be. Now they're starting to realize its power in politics. They're starting to catch up on the backstage regimes and everything else. And like, all right, maybe we stop watching, they'll stop delivering bad content. Nope, it just kept getting worse.
And it kind of goes back to what I'm talking about with the egos, is you can tell in the finishes of the match is that, all right, you just gave Goldberg 300 straight fucking wins or whatever it was. And Kevin Nash, you know how Kevin Nash defeated Bill Goldberg at the end of the streak?
Yeah,
he shocked him with a taser.
Yeah, Scott Hall came out with the taser. As a matter of fact, I saw the promo on that today. He's like, that was quite shocking. As a matter of fact, I think Bill Goldberg is still stunned. I was like, oh, dude. He threw so many puns, dude. And the guy that interviewed him would not crack a smile. I'm like, how can you be so cold-hearted to not laugh at a Scott Hall joke? Like, if you got paid to do it, it was great. I lost it, man. Like, this is why I enjoyed characters like Scott Hall and Kevin Nash. These two were comedic style wrestlers who still took the serious business part of it all. And
you have to admit those guys had a blast. They had a fucking ball. And
I mean, even they talked about how bad they ran
the show at some point. Good for them.
But down the road, post NWO, if you remember the whole fall, how everything started looking the same. Everything started becoming bland, and Nitro and Thunder both use the same stage and set,
and they could never get away from like old WCW. Like, they brought Ric Flair back to be a hero to help the Giant, and they could just never get away from
if they would have focused on building new stars.
Yeah, exactly. You're exactly right. That's what I was trying to get at.
That's how Vince McMahon kind of is sometimes. You know,
and
he hits that panic button, and he's doing the same thing to his company that Bischoff and Flair did to theirs.
But my God, look at all the talent that WCW had at that time. I mean, you're talking about Jericho was still there, Benoit, Eddie Guerrero, Rey Mysterio, the Psychosis, all those luchadors, La Parca,
nWo, and you know,
Prince
after we do this 5-episode series of the nWo, we're going to do a post WCW, post nWo fallout. We'll do a 1 episode on it because I want to talk about the factions that happened after all this, after the nWo fell the first time. And,
I mean, we could probably do like the nWo Elite and the B Team and the WWE version. We'd probably do that in 15 minutes because it was so uneventful.
Yeah, like, as soon as all this, like we said, since we're already at the bottom of the barrel with this whole entire nWo thing, you know, we got over the hump. Now we got to get to the rest of it. And that's when things get really painful. And, of course, we're going to talk about, you know, the next part of the nWo, I think, next weekend.
Yeah, you think the second half of 1998 and the first half of 1998, as far as inducting new members and these trash finishes were bad?
Yeah, wait till end of 99, 2000.
Wait until 99 and wait until the worst finish of all time of any wrestling match.
As soon as we start talking about that and people actually listen to it, they're gonna be like, geez, you know, especially with today's wrestling fans, they're gonna be like, I'm glad I didn't watch this bullshit, you know, because after a while you realize WCW started becoming true garbage.
That's right. We touched on the egos going on at the time. You have no idea about 1999 and the finish of one match in general, which
that's next week. We're definitely talking about that, and I can't wait.
Fucking ego. So,
man, I can't put my finger on it, but I'm sure someone else can.
Yeah, I mean, poke me later, maybe, and I'll let you know.
I won't be, but we'll find someone that will.
All right.
Oh, man. Yeah. I mean, there was a lot that happened in 98. And, of course, you know, like we said, weird shit. Egotistical stuff.
It was kind of like when the tables turned, even though WCW was still ruling the ratings at that time. But you could feel it, and when you go back and now and watch it, you can kind of feel it that they were slipping away with a lot of the with everything that we touched on earlier. But I don't think at the time the WWF, I think they were building 2.
Yeah.
As far as not to get off subject, but they were building 2, and obviously 1998 was not WCW's year in the ratings. Excuse me, 1999. So,
that's right. Ray Traylor was part of the B Team, and they kicked him out. They kicked him out in no time.
Mm-hmm.
As a matter of fact, I'm looking at it right now. We had Ray Traylor and the Steiner brothers during this time. About right around this time is when Scott started joining the nWo, because he didn't join the nWo till later. This is around the time he started coming back from his injury, or before his injury. Right after he recovered from his neck injury, he comes back. He turns on his brother, because what happened was they were doing their in-ring signature pose, and out of nowhere, as soon as they started doing the Scott just gives him the fucking, what do they call it? It's like that fucking the double arm hammer. They call it like the double arm hammer or something like that. It's like basically when he's on top and he's like pounding on your back. It's basically like a sledgehammer type move. He turns his back on. I believe he even gave him a Steiner recliner just to, you know, verify that this is a complete turn on your brother. But of course, during this time as well, I believe Ray Traylor also was early in the nWo, and then he immediately got kicked out. But they were up against Conan, Scott Norton, and Buff Bagwell with Vincent. Fucking Vincent and Virgil. I mean, this right here, that was, I appreciated him in WWF when he was with Ted DiBiase, and it was ironic that they brought him and Ted DiBiase together in the NWO. So basically, Vincent had a price for the $1 Million Man. But let's see, we talked about Zbyszko versus Scott Hall, and of course, Louis Piccoli was there. Of course, we had Kevin Nash versus the Giant, and the Giant's neck almost got snapped in half, if you recall that match.
You know what's funny is that we didn't even touch on K-Dog, Conan.
Yeah, I mean, Conan, he was a big part of this. As a matter of fact, didn't he join the Wolfpack later on? Like, during this whole thing, you started to see who was going to defect.
Conan was like one of the innovators of the Wolfpack. He was a guy that was like the only guy that had no links to the original NWO, unless you count Sting, which it's hit or miss. Some people,
because they got him in. They got him on Hollywood.
Sting. They always kind of hinted at Sting joining, but Conan was the only guy with no links at all to the NWO that was like a Wolfpack guy and one of the originators of that.
Like they worked him so well. It was like he was basically like that backstage ploy on how to turn him without showing anything. And as soon as he joined Wolfpack, I was like, yeah, things are going to get a little bit better. And then of course, he always cut funny promo. When he was a heel, he always shit on people.
He was over. Conan was over.
Like, Conan was one of the greatest, luchador technical style wrestlers. Poor Max Moon. Oh, yeah, we know about that.
Holy shit, I forgot about that. Yeah.
I didn't. I actually saw him live when he started debuting in WWF. I'll talk about that down the road, too, because it was a 6-hour show and he had 2 different events on the card. But watching him live was great. He didn't have the same moveset he used in WCW because he was Max Moon and he wore a weird costume.
Max Moon.
But yeah, Conan, Scott Norton, Buffbag. Well, man, Scott Norton was a beast. Like, no one could fuck with that guy. He was a brick wall.
His All Japan, New Japan shit was insane. Like I said, I talked about last weekend. He was like the heir to Stan Hansen in Japan. He was
absolutely.
A stiff guy. He moved well. Beast.
And then let's see. So we had Nash versus Giant, and of course we had Bret Hart. I believe he was in NWO Hollywood during this time too, and he beat Ric Flair. And then
obviously everybody knows they used. Obviously everybody knows they used Bret terribly.
Yeah. Here's the underrated part of the card. Booker T versus Rick Martel. Of all people, Rick fucking Martel, dude.
Right, and Booker T should have been the champion by at least some sort of main eventer by then.
Yeah, and and it's sad because Booker, when they gave him his singles run, he didn't get the credit he deserved. Like,
the fucking company was dead by then.
I mean, when they finally gave him his push, the company was at the dead end because he was the last. He was the last WCW World Champion.
Right, it was all over then.
So they're like, yeah, we're going to give him the title, and then we're going to have him go into WWE with it. No, just don't.
See, then the Alliance or whatever, all that storyline, unfortunately, was botched.
Yeah, that was a complete shit show. Like, they had no creativity whatsoever. It was just like, we're just going to bring in all these guys that, fucking castaways and make them feel special. Put them in WWE, which they've been there before. We want to talk about Aldo Montoya.
Yeah, my boy.
Let the bodies hit the floor.
My boy JC, Target's own.
Yeah, I need to interview him again.
Yeah, he's a good interview. Definitely him and New Jack.
Yeah. Let's see, we're going on the 11 o'clock hour, and we covered a whole lot as much as we could.
I mean, we were kind of upfront about it from the beginning that 1998 for WCW, well, not so much WCW, but the NWO was an up and down year.
98 wasn't the best with their pay-per-views, to be honest.
We're not here to sugarcoat it or build up anything that happened. We kind of told it like it was and like it is, and it was a shit year mostly, and it was what led ultimately to the WWF taking over the ratings war the following year in 1999.
And next week, as a matter of fact, we'll talk about that next week. About a very important line that definitely put WCW, took them off of the map, and we could thank Tony Schiavone for that one. So, with that being said, any final words that you want to talk about? That you want to say about the end of '98?
No, I think that we touched on a lot. I think that 96 to 98 was the glory years for the NWO, and I think that 1998 was a telling year for the NWO and wrestling in general, where the switch flipped from WCW's short run to the WWF's ultimate run to what ultimately became of where they are today.
Alright, well, with that being said, we're going to wrap up tonight's episode, y'all. I want to thank everyone for being here. Thank you, Chaos, again. I'm glad we're able to talk about some NWO stuff. Once we're done with this 5-part series, we'll start working our way towards the next few things to go down the road with, regardless if it's a 1-part or multiple. Next week, we will be talking about that certain finger. We'll also talk about some NWO Elite and the B Team as well. Basically, the demise that started to break down what was left of WCW, and then move forward from there.
Right, and also I want to add that I'm gonna give my top 10 WCW cruiserweights next week.
Oh.
Live.
Oh, hell yeah! You know what? I'm gonna have to do something like that as well, just so we can even the odds.
All right.
Well, with that said,
do that.
Everyone, thank you again. Be sure to give this show a like. If you haven't followed, click that subscribe button. Anything you like to hear, see us talk about down the road, feel free to use it in the comment section. Until then, this is CM Styles, and along with me as always is Chaos. Everyone have a good night, and then we'll see you next Friday night for some more Destroying Kayfabe. Good night.